Have you ever felt that just overwhelming sense of what's the point when it comes to politics?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the problems are just way too big or the system is too broken. And, well, frankly, your individual actions just won't make a blind bit of difference.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a feeling I think a lot of us share, especially when the news cycle just feels relentlessly negative and honestly overwhelming.
Yeah, it really does. And, that very question, but what can I do? Hey, that's actually the driving force behind the incredibly insightful book we're doing a deep dive into today.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a dedication really to all those people who feel that frustration and that powerlessness. And it brilliantly seeks to give us a practical roadmap for action, shifting us from that feeling of futility to, well, genuine empowerment.
And that's exactly our mission today, isn't it? We're
Yeah.
going to unpack how this deep sense of political despair and apathy has sort of taken hold. But crucially, we're going to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from this incredible source material to show you what you can do and, maybe more importantly, why your engagement matters more now than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Get ready to transform that feeling of being overwhelmed into feeling truly equipped.
Let's do it.
So let's start at the beginning then. The author dedicates his book to people asking, what can I do?
Yeah.
What's really at the heart of that widespread sentiment, that almost universal sigh of resignation so many of us feel?
Well, what the author identifies is a really profound sense of frustration and powerlessness.
Okay.
People feel genuinely unable to fight for change or even to confront the sheer number of barriers preventing them from even trying.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes.
It does, and this in turn leads to hopelessness, which isn't just, a political problem. It can deeply impact mental health and threaten our very sense of purpose.
Wow.
He notes this trend particularly in young people who, while maybe not yet entirely hopeless, appear to be on a trajectory toward it. And actually, the author himself confesses to, sharing that sense of hopelessness at times, given the state of the world.
Right. It's relatable. And this isn't just some vague abstract feeling of powerlessness, is it? The author really pinpoints the systemic issues. How does the book specifically argue that the current mess in politics and media actively fosters this despairing apathy, and crucially, that it benefits what the author calls chancers and charlatans?
That's exactly right. The book explains that this widespread loathing, really, for what politics has become, combined with that sense of powerlessness, creates a vacuum.
Okay.
And it allows these chancers and charlatans, as the author puts it, to thrive by exploiting that disaffection. It's also made worse by very real systemic barriers that prevent, ordinary people from getting into politics in the first place. And this leads to an ever-narrowing and, frankly, increasingly homogenous group of leaders, which then, paradoxically, alienates normal people even further from the whole political process. It's a bit of a cycle.
Yeah, a vicious cycle. So, having mapped out this landscape of disengagement, the author then guides us on a journey through how we actually got here.
Yeah.
What does the book identify as the critical turning points?
Right.
And how do those infamous 3 Ps, populism, polarization, and post-truth, fit into this historical picture?
Yeah, it's a fascinating arc he traces. He points to the optimism of the early 90s, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the rise of personal computing as this moment of hope.
I remember that feeling.
Yeah, but beneath that, harmful trends were already brewing. He highlights the cult of the individual, where, personal gain was prioritized above collective good.
Right.
And the corruption of trickle-down economics, that whole idea that cutting taxes for the wealthy would stimulate the economy and somehow benefit everyone, which, often didn't materialize for ordinary people and just fueled inequality. So these foundational issues kind of laid the groundwork, but the major tipping point was undoubtedly the global financial crisis of 2008.
Oh, yeah.
That crisis led to such a sharp decline in trust in institutions, and it just intensely amplified societal divisions. Many felt, greedy bankers got away with it while we, the people hit hardest, paid the price.
That's a really powerful connection. So let's break down those 3 Ps a bit. Starting with polarization, what does that actually mean in practice, beyond just people disagreeing? Because it feels like we see it everywhere these days.
Yeah, we do. Polarization, the author explains, really thrives on uncertainty and fear. It actively pushes us into these us versus them groups.
Right.
And then confirmation bias, that human tendency to selectively interpret or recall information that confirms what we already believe, it just becomes deeply entrenched.
So you only hear what you want to hear, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And a chilling example from the book is how the term woke became this sort of catch-all term of abuse. Figures like Michael Gove, when he famously said, "The people of this country have had enough of experts," were actively encouraging people to dismiss informed advice. This created this dividing line between we, the people who are good and true, and them, the shadowy establishment figures, effectively demonizing legitimate criticism and, while shutting down free speech.
Wow. Okay, and populism. We hear that word thrown around constantly, often with a negative slant. What's the book's take on it?
Well, the classic definition, as the book notes, is a form of politics aimed at ordinary people who feel their concerns are not addressed by the elite.
Okay, that sounds reasonable on the surface.
It does. But the book also quotes an Australian commentator known as Sleuth for Truth, who offers a more critical perspective. He argues it's the art of agitating disaffected voters to vote against their best interests by amplifying problems and not really offering anything in return.
Ooh, that's sharp.
It is. Populist leaders like, say, Donald Trump or Boris Johnson, they present themselves as anti-politics politicians. They thrive on division, offering simple, often unrealistic solutions in uncertain times, claiming to be on the side of the pure people against the corrupt elite.
Right, tapping into that frustration we talked about.
Exactly. And finally, post-truth. This concept feels like it's almost defined our modern era, doesn't it? Like a world where facts are just optional. Indeed. The author argues that populism often involves holding up a kind of distorting mirror to society. Lying in this environment becomes a strategic tool, not just a personal failing.
A tool.
Wow. The book highlights numerous examples. Putin's special military operation lie, Kellyanne Conway's infamous alternative facts for Trump, and Boris Johnson's well-documented serial fantasist tendencies. It even cites Dominic Cummings observing that Johnson lied so often, so effortlessly, and so shamelessly that he no longer knew when he was telling the truth or lying.
That's deeply troubling.
It is. And this erosion of truth profoundly damages democratic institutions. And it's often facilitated, the book argues, by enablers in media and politics who prioritize partisan gain over just reporting the facts.
Okay, that all sounds incredibly bleak, and it certainly gives us a clearer picture of how we got into this mess. So what does this all mean for us? How does the book suggest we pivot from this despair to some kind of actionable hope?
Right, the crucial question.
And, in a world where we're constantly bombarded with negative news and, let's face it, legitimate reasons for concern, how does the book suggest we sustain that resistance without just becoming naive? Is there a fine line the author explores between healthy skepticism and outright cynicism?
That's a really crucial question. And the first step, the author says, is absolutely to resist cynicism and firmly reject that phrase, "it is what it is."
Oh, I hate that phrase.
Me too. He calls it 5 tiny words deadened by defeatism. Hope, he clarifies, isn't blind optimism. It's the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us.
I like that.
You have to genuinely believe that things can be better. So the book doesn't ask us to be naive, not at all, but to use our skepticism as a motivator to investigate and act rather than letting it just, drive out all hope.
So the book specifically targets those really common cynical statements like, oh, it's impossible for one person to make a difference.
Yeah.
What's the counter argument here? How do we fight that feeling?
Well, the author states it unequivocally. It's just not true.
Okay.
The belief that change can come and that you as an individual can make it happen is essential. This is the absolute core of developing what he calls a campaigning mindset.
A campaigning mindset. Tell me more about that.
It means being, obsessive, maybe in a good way, being alert and alive to opportunities and keen to persuade others. He gives this really great personal example of this mindset helping save his beloved football club, Burnley.
Oh, really? How?
Yeah, he describes calling in favors, generating media attention, really hustling. He talks about being part of a campaign that it wasn't just wishing, it was doing.
That's a fantastic, tangible example of that campaigning mindset in action. What do you think, based on the author's account, was the most critical element in that Burnley campaign? Was it just sheer willpower, or the strategic planning, or maybe the community rallying together that really turned the tide?
Well, from his account, it really seems to be a blend of all three. But crucially, it started with that unwavering belief and an action-oriented approach. That idea of get good out of bad.
Right.
He turned that anger and frustration into productive action. He shows that the sheer willpower to act, coupled with smart planning and mobilizing a community, can actually overcome seemingly insurmountable odds.
I love that. Get good out of bad. That feels like a really powerful motto, actually, and it perfectly sets the stage for the next layer of the author's roadmap, which gets into the practical architecture of successful movements. To achieve real change, the book introduces a trinity of campaign essentials. Can you break down those pillars for us?
Absolutely. These are pretty straightforward but powerful. Campaigns need leaders, leaders need teams, and teams need strategies.
Okay, makes sense.
And crucially, all three are interdependent. They draw strength from each other. So first, leadership. The author argues leadership can be taught and honed. It's not some innate magical quality you're born with.
That's encouraging.
It is. Good leaders build strong teams, they avoid the blame game, they listen actively, communicate effectively, and importantly, lead by example. And he emphasizes that everyone has some capacity for leadership, even if you don't hold a formal title. It's about taking initiative and guiding others, even in small ways.
Okay, so leadership isn't just for the person at the top.
Not at all, which leads to teamship. Leaders naturally rely on their teams. The book identifies 3 types of people within a high-performing team. The leaders themselves, the warriors, those who do the hard grind, the day-to-day work, and the special talents who provide that spark, creativity, and fresh perspectives.
Warriors and special talents, I like that.
Yeah. And he uses this great example of a hotel doorman or receptionist, illustrating how leadership attributes and a sense of shared culture are vital at all levels, not just the CEO's office. Everyone contributes to the overall success.
Right. Everyone plays a part. And the third pillar?
Strategy. This is the how. How are you going to achieve your objective? The author uses a really straightforward framework. OST. Objective, strategy, tactics.
OST.
Your objective needs to be clear, ambitious, yes, but also realistic and measurable. You absolutely need to know what success looks like.
Makes sense.
Strategy, he says, is often the hardest part. It's the coherent plan to get you from where you are to your objective. And he stresses thinking in ink, actually writing it down for clarity and agreement.
Writing it down. Interesting. Why is that so important?
Because it forces clarity. It forces agreement. The author recounts how modernization and the slogan New Labour, New Britain became the coherent strategic framing for a successful political campaign back in the day. It emphasized proactive action over just waiting for opponents to mess up. This OST framework is powerful because it forces that clarity and alignment, making sure everyone is pulling in the same direction towards a really clearly defined goal.
It sounds like these principles, leadership, teamship, strategy, are universally applicable, like whether you're fighting for a global cause or just managing a complex project at work.
Exactly right. They apply whether you're trying to win an election, get a job promotion, or save your local park from developers. The core logic of defining what you want to achieve, figuring out how you'll get there, and deciding who will help you, that holds true across almost any endeavor.
The book is also packed with some incredible stories of people who really embodied this campaigning mindset. Who are some of the standout role models the author mentions, and what powerful lessons can we maybe learn from them?
Oh, there are so many inspiring figures. David Steele, for example, who through a private member's bill, which is basically a legislative proposal introduced by an individual MP rather than the government, managed to secure the Abortion Act 1967 in the UK. A huge change.
Wow, one person pushing that through.
Exactly. Then there's Harriet Harman, a real trailblazer for women's rights and key legislative advances like the Equality Act. Gina Martin, who literally changed the law on upskirting, that disgusting act of secretly taking photos up someone's skirt. After the police initially told her nothing could be done, she just refused to accept that.
Incredible persistence.
Absolutely. And of course, a more recent example, Marcus Rashford, the footballer, who leveraged his fame and platform brilliantly to shame the government into action on child food poverty.
Yeah, his campaign was very powerful. And perhaps the most prominent global example, especially for younger generations, is Greta Thunberg. What does the book say about her profound impact?
Greta is described as living proof that it's cool to care.
I love that.
Yeah. Her authenticity, her simple, direct call to action, listen to the science, and her deep, absolutely undeniable understanding of her subject made her a global phenomenon. She's incredibly strong in the face of relentless criticism, fearless in confronting powerful opponents, and she absolutely knows her stuff. It comes back to that campaigning mindset. The author cites Bono's powerful take on it, where he famously declared something like, "When you see Everest, Tony, you don't just look at it, you climb it." It's about that mindset of active engagement, not passive observation.
That's a strong image. Communication is clearly a huge part of campaigning effectively, as we saw with Greta and Zelensky. How does the book guide us on getting our message across effectively in today's incredibly noisy, fragmented world?
Yeah,
It feels harder than ever.
it does. And the keys, according to the book, are surprisingly simple but hard to execute. Know your story, keep it simple, and be authentic.
Simple, clear, authentic.
Exactly. The book highlights Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's mastery of this. He expertly tweaks his delivery for different platforms, from formal addresses to world leaders, down to raw selfie videos from Kyiv, while consistently maintaining his core messages of resilience and freedom. He uses humor, often at Russia's expense, and really shows us the power of fully embracing social media while understanding its nuances and how to adapt his message for each specific context.
But let's be real, social media can also be incredibly toxic and draining. How do we navigate that, especially when we're putting ourselves out there for a cause we care about?
That's a huge challenge. The author advises what he calls a "don't let the bastards get you down" approach. Basically, develop a thick skin.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
But Julia Gillard, the former Australian Prime Minister, is quoted saying something really potent. If you let the abuse be the deciding factor in whether you speak out or act, you let the bad people win.
Oh, it puts it starkly.
It does. The book stresses that while social media is a powerful tactic for mobilization and raising awareness, think about the Me Too movement or the Inspiring Girls campaign, it's not the strategy itself. Physical campaigning, real-world engagement, building actual community connections offline, these are still absolutely vital for making real, lasting change. Social media supports it, but it doesn't replace it.
That's a really important distinction. Tactic versus strategy. Okay, so it's clear that communicating effectively and navigating difficult environments like social media are crucial, yet often daunting. But the book also tackles a very personal barrier that often stops people from even starting. Just a lack of confidence, especially when it comes to speaking up or putting themselves out there publicly. Does the author offer practical tools for building that inner strength?
It absolutely does. And this section is particularly resonant, I think, because it draws heavily on the author's own personal struggles with anxiety and even panic attacks.
Oh, wow, he shares that.
He does. And he emphasizes that confidence can be learned and honed, much like any other skill. It's not fixed. It comes through practice and preparation. He shares specific techniques he personally uses, like rubbing his thumb and forefinger together to ground himself, visualization exercises to mentally rehearse success, and deep breathing to calm his nervous system before speaking.
Practical things you can actually do.
Exactly. He even describes using a kind of light bulb on mental switch for public speaking, a specific internal cue he uses to activate his performance mode. The core message here isn't about eliminating anxiety entirely, because maybe that's unrealistic for many. It's about learning to manage it, to use that nervous energy as a motivator, and crucially, to acknowledge and learn from criticism without letting others' abuse define your reality or silence your voice.
Correct.
It's about building a robust internal toolkit,
We're building resilience, really.
Precisely. So if you remember just one thing from this deep dive today, maybe let it be this.
Yeah.
You absolutely have it within you to make a difference. Resist that cynicism and apathy we talked about. Try to understand how the system works, the good and the bad, and adopt that campaigning mindset. Focus on clear objectives, strategic thinking, and importantly, collaborative teamship.
I love that. It's simple, but really profound, isn't it? It reminds us that our individual engagement, whether it feels big or small, isn't just about personal achievement or feeling good. It's actually about shaping the world we live in. It's about choosing not to be a bystander.
Exactly. And the book closes with a really powerful thought aimed right at you, the listener. The history of this turbulent period we're living through might ultimately be defined not by the polarizing figures who dominate the headlines right now, but by people yet to come to public prominence. Perhaps some of you listening right now who are currently thinking, saying, writing, and campaigning for a better future.
Wow, that's quite a thought. And that's the provocative idea we want to leave you with today. In the words of the author, inspired by the incredible courage of Miep Gies, the woman who hid Anne Frank and her family, never be a bystander, don't ignore, fight for the change you believe in. So the question is, what change will you fight for?